It's the biggest myth in Star Trek, and honestly, I thought this nonsense had been dismissed years ago, but apparently not. Welcome to the Tachyon Pulse podcast.
Our tachyon pulse has been unable to completely penetrate the anomaly.
Before I tell you what I'm talking about today, this started basically because of, let's say, a debate. It was an argument, on the comments page yesterday. Because I keep calling the original series, TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager and Enterprise, the Prime Universe. Right? And they were saying, no, it's not. Their actual argument was the J.J. Abrams stuff. This basically spawned now what they argue is the multiverse of Star Trek is Prime Universe, and everything before that is just canon, is just Star Trek. Through the debate anyway, I in the end conceded that okay, I will accept that everything that Gene Roddenberry did up till basically season 2 of TNG ended, when Gene Roddenberry had an influence in creative instance before Brennan Braga and Co took over, is sort of like Star Trek. Let's call it Roddenberry Star Trek. Then it goes into the Prime Universe. A Prime meaning the most important, the first, the Prime Directive, Prime Universe, whatever you want to say. Prime Universe, the one we actually care about. Then J.J. Abrams came along and did the Kelvin timeline, named after the Kelvin that was destroyed. And then New Trek is a mix of Prime, when they bother respecting canon, and a mix of, let's call it, Kurtzman Trek, for want of a better word. I would swear, but I'm turning over a new leaf. I'm not going to swear on the channel anymore. Bollocks. So, that argument basically then led into the why do you believe this nonsense? And they referred me to a Midnight Edge video from about 6 years ago that was nonsense at the time and is still nonsense now. So, what was their argument? He basically said that the changes that Abrams did to Star Trek for the 2009 onwards movies, and then actually what New Trek have done since, were forced on them because of a rights issue. If you are a big Trekkie, you're going to know where I'm going with this. And you probably believe that the rights issue is a thing because it was so widely discussed and so widely spread around there by YouTubers as fact, when it's not. So what was the argument? Basically, Sumner Redstone, Cherie Redstone's daddy, who owns National Amusements, had the controlling interest in Paramount going back to when it was Gulf and Western. And while he owned Paramount, he then bought CBS. Now, before that, Star Trek wasn't run by CBS like it is today. But then they bought CBS. He had that for a few years, and they sort of ticked over with Star Trek and stuff. And then CBS and Paramount, for some unknown reason, Sumner Redstone decided to separate those two companies. His argument at the time was basically that they're very, very different entities, and he wanted to create them and separate them for ease of management and corporate needs and things. It's probably a tax break, let's be honest, but other companies were bringing, like Disney, etc., were bringing these companies and networks under house. He decided, or in-house, in Mickey Mouse house, he decided to separate the two. Inexplicable at the time. It didn't work. A few years later, they had to reintegrate them. But for the time, we had Viacom, which owned Paramount, and CBS. I think they called it CBS Corporation. I think they called it. That was Sumner's decision. He decided to do that. Cost the company a fortune, actually, in the long run, but that's what they did. Now, the argument there is that CBS ended up owning the TV rights and the rights to Star Trek. And the myth is that those rights were then, under a license agreement, given to Paramount so they could do the J.J. Abrams movies. It's not true. It is true, though, that the head of Paramount at the time hated sci-fi and cut Star Trek because he didn't even know the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars. That part of the myth is true. He got rid of it because he just couldn't be arsed with it. The reason, though, he actually couldn't be bothered with it when he said at the time was that at the time when Enterprise Season 5 was sort of cancelled, the decision was made to cancel it. Sort of reality TV and stuff was what was really popular on the television at the time. And if you look at reality TV, it was making more money than something like Star Trek. But it cost like a 50th of the cost to produce. So, if you've got two shows both making £1 billion for you a year, I know that's exaggerating, but one costs $100 million to make and the other one costs $10 million to make, from a business point of view, I know which one you're going to pick. Because one, reality TV that costs nothing to make, was generating lots and lots of income at the time. Now, it's not quite true, and I would argue, actually, as an executive, you're supposed to try to cater for as wide an audience as possible when you're picking TV shows and not focus just on what is making money at the time. But that's what he decided to do. Now, this is where the myth of the 25% different thing comes in. There must be 25% difference to the reality, the original. Now, I've spoken, as one of the people we get to speak to over here at the Tachyon Pulse, with somebody that is actually a lawyer for this sort of thing. It's what they do for a living. And he said, no. His point was, how would you quantify that? You're talking about images, basically. The enterprise. How do you make it 25% different? If the other party, if CBS goes, that's not 25% different, you've then got to go to court and argue it. And how do you quantify it? It comes down to opinion. He says it would be an incredibly difficult thing to legislate. So he said, no, that isn't done in this sort of circumstance. It is done in some circumstances in business. And I think this is where this myth comes from. If you are, say, Volkswagen comes up with they invented that screen, the front screen that heats, so you get the ice gone. And then other companies try to copy it. In that case, you have to be able to say that it's 25% different in the technology at the least, so that you don't have to pay the original company royalties. So now I think that's where this myth has come from, because that is something that is quantifiable. You can look at the plans and go, right, it's got to be at least 25% different. You've got to use at least 25% of the components, or the technology has to be different, or you're paying the original company royalties. When you're talking about a film, a TV series, especially when you remember that they use all the same characters, all the same name, all the same backstory up until the Kelvin timeline split, where's the 25% coming into it? Visually, the Enterprise was changed because J.J. Abrams wanted it to change. Now, okay, there were financial reasons why they made lots and lots of changes to the new J.J. Abrams Star Trek, and why they did the Kelvin timeline split in the first place. But it has nothing to do with the license agreements, because CBS had the TV rights and Paramount had the movie rights, and that is perfectly normal. For example, Firefly, the show we love. Disney still own the TV rights to the Firefly. They still own them today. But Universal bought the movie rights. It's fine. They can make movies. There are rules within it. It has to go to cinema for so long and blah, blah, blah. They can't do straight to TV movies, apparently. But they can do movies, which is whatever's in the contract, really. But Disney own the TV rights. It's not complicated, and that's what happened with Star Trek under the Viacom split. Paramount was the movie maker, CBS was the TV maker, and that's how they divided the split. So why was Star Trek so pigging, different and annoying in every way? Really like the J.J. Abrams Star Treks, by the way. I'm just going to side note here. I just don't think they're Star Trek. They're good action, sci-fi movies, they're not Star Trek. But anyway, why were they so different? The main reason was J.J. Abrams wanted them to be. And this is actually the same argument for why New Trek is so different. Because Alex Kurtzman wants it to be. And this is something we get a lot with remakes or reimaginings or whatever. When new creators come in, they want to stamp their authority on it. They want to make it their own. And that is the main reason why we did things like the Kelvin timeline split. So that way, J.J. Abrams was like, well, I can do whatever I want now, because everything that happened before doesn't matter. There is no canon. We can do whatever we want. And it was freeing for them as writers. Great. Good. It was actually quite a clever way of doing it at the time if you want to do something that's completely different, as long as you go back to the Prime Universe afterwards, which Kurtzman didn't. God, I'm talking really quickly in this video because I'm quite annoyed about it. Can you tell? There was, though, also a merchandise issue, in that they wanted to sell some. So they did change things like, and I think the best example of this is the bloody phaser, particularly from the first movies. Notice they dropped it for the other two. But the first movie had the spinny bit where it was blue for stun and red for kill and it spun. They did that to make a toy. It's simple as that. It looked like a toy on the show. So they did that for a toy. So there was a merchandise thing at the time, because at that time merchandise still sold. It doesn't as much now. Basically, this stuff for adults is all it really sells. But back then, toys were still a thing before kids found iPads. And that was the main reason why we saw all the changes. There was never a rights issue. Viacom and Paramount and CBS were never in competition. This was fake. These ideas that they were in competition with each other and that they didn't even like each other is just nonsense. They still had the same owner. They still had the majority share owner. It was still Summer Redstone and National Amusements. They cooperated in lots and lots of ways. And let's also remember that the J.J. Abrams movie started in the Prime universe. It started within Star Trek we know, and then split after the Kelvin was destroyed. So if there was these issues, CBS would have sued, wouldn't they? But they didn't. Another good reason why, actually, you can tell that they did a lot of these changes because they wanted to, is look at the Enterprise in all three of the Abrams movies. The Enterprise changes. That's not because of a license agreement. That's because he bloody wanted to. So there were creative reasons, if you can call it that. I think we're being kind if we call it creative reasons. There were creative reasons why Star Trek changed so dramatically. But why has Secret Hideout gone the same way? As I said, because he wants to, for one. He wants to stamp his authority on Star Trek, and that's why we saw so many things from the J.J. Abrams Star Treks coming through, like the Klingons and stuff in Season 1 of Discovery, because Kurtzman had written those episodes and was very much involved in those films. And he brought those ideas through. It's why we saw the Romulan star going off and what have you, and the refugees thing in Picard season 1 or 2. 1. I tried to block those from my memory. Picard season 1 or 2 it make me angry. Again, it's not a rights issue. Star Trek is owned in totality, the IP, by Paramount. Except for Under Secret Hideout. This gets complicated. Now, this is a thing. This is actually something that is quite a big problem for Star Trek moving forwards. And again, if you're a regular viewer, you'll know you've seen this a million times. But Secret Hideout have a license agreement with CBS and Paramount, who are now owned by one company. That agreement basically means that CBS make the show. It's done at CBS Studios. But Secret Hideout do all the creative work. They write all the scripts, they do all the thing, they decide the direction of it, and Paramount just basically pays the check. Anything that is Star Trek originally is owned by Paramount. But anything that Secret Hideout then do with those characters, or if they create anything new characters, those are owned by Secret Hideout because they created them. Now, Secret Hideout can never do anything with that if they lost their contract in 18 months without Paramount, but Paramount can't use characters that they come up with or reference storylines in some cases that they came up with in any new show without Secret Hideout. So you're in a catch-22. And that is the only thing Secret Hideout has going for it if they want to get a new contract next year. So, that is the reality. Don't believe everything you see on YouTube channels, including this one. But that is the truth. And I'm really hoping that this video can put this myth to bed. Check the comments. I bet it doesn't. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification. It really helps us out and you'll never miss any of our new videos. Also, you can become a member of the channel. You get to see videos up to 24 hours before everyone else. Go check that out. As always, please stay safe, and I'll see you next time.
Our tachyon pulse has been unable to completely penetrate the anomaly.